Good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to be able to today to have this special presentation on the proposed power plant for West and East Grand Bahama. And we're especially privileged today to be able to host this here at Living Water Assembly. And we are just happy that each of you took your time out to be with us today for this very special presentation to the community, to our church, and to the wider, I guess, nation of the Bahamas. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Pastor Margarita Monroe, co-pastor of Word of Life Ministries, to come and open us up in prayer. Would you please? Thank you, Pastor Margarita. That was a powerful prayer. You may be seated. As many of you know, or for those of you that may not know, for 5 years, the Coalition of Concerned Citizens has been advocating in the community, the island of Grand Bahama, for the lowering of the cost of electricity throughout this island, which means that our campaign particularly was directed towards the Grand Bahama Power Company. Now, I have to say that 5 years later, the power company has not lowered the cost of electricity, and based on several recent statements that they have made a commitment that they will not increase the cost of electricity for the next 5 years, but what that also means that they're not going to reduce it. And this is from their own statement, and we believe that the cost of electricity is too high in Grand Bahama. But going back to when we began this campaign in September 2013, we at that time, in advocating for the lowering of the cost of electricity, we also called for that the agreement known as the West End and East End Agreement between the government and the Grand Bahama Power Company. This is an agreement that allows the Grand Bahama Power Company to provide electricity in West Grand Bahama and East Grand Bahama. We have advocated at the very initial start of our campaign that those agreements were not to be renewed. 5 years later, that 25-year agreement now the two agreements will expire this year, 2018. When the present government came into power in May 2017, the coalition at the end of May wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. And in that letter, there were several things that we had asked the Prime Minister and the government to intervene in the energy sector of Grand Bahama. But one of the things that we petitioned our government to do was not to renew the agreement, the West End and East End agreement with the power company, and to allow a Bahamian power company or a new power company to come in and to build their plants here and bring down the cost of energy. Well, I am happy to report to everybody here that we have presented to the government a new power company, a power company known, and I shouldn't say they're new, but I guess in the case of our presentation to the government, I guess we can say it was new, but we have presented to the government a company known as Northern Bahamas Utilities. And if you would just follow the screen for a minute, you will see that Northern Bahamas Utilities is a company, and you can see some of the faces there. These are Bahamians, these are professional engineers, and they all live here on Grand Bahama. This is their home. And this company has made application to the government to build power plants in West and East Grand Bahama from October 2017. and um, we await the government's decision on their application. And but I want to prepare the way, because we're going to hear from the president and one of the principals of Northern Bahamas Utility. But I want to be able to say and to introduce him, but I want to introduce him in this way. Why should Northern Bahamas Utilities be allowed to build power plants in West and East Grand Bahama? And I want to give you some, I believe, some very important information. Number one, and the most important point is this: electricity rates will be reduced by 33 to 40% in West and East Grand Bahama. That's number one. And I think that's the most important thing when we're dealing with electricity. We need the cost to come down. And this power company will bring the cost down. And, you know, it was in one of the many times that we've been before the press together with Northern Bahamas Utilities, you know, the question did come up, okay, you know, why should the government approve Northern Bahamas Utilities? And if you talk to this company, the one premier, I would say primary reason, is that they are committed to bringing down the cost of electricity. And I think if we have listened to the most recent news, this is now have become a national outcry that the cost of electricity is too high. And if we listen to these power companies, they're coming up with all kinds of excuses why the prices are so high. The problem is with their business model. In the case of Grand Bahama Power Company, which is a 100% foreign-owned company, it was not that way as of last year, but through corporate maneuvering, legal corporate maneuvering. In the United States, it would be called, what is it called, a hostile takeover. They were able to force the Bahamian shareholders, the minority Bahamian shareholders, to sell their shares to a foreign company. And so Northern Bahamas Utilities, we can really say they are our own. They're from here. They're us. They're our people. The next important point is this. Northern Bahamas Utilities is 100% Bahamian owned and operated. That's very important, particularly when we talk about Bahamianization, empowering our own people economically. We have now a company that has the experience, the technical know-how, have the funding to build new power plants on this island. The principals, the directors, and key personnel are all qualified Bahamian engineers. And we're going to even qualify that statement by something I will talk about just a little later in my presentation. All the qualified Bahamian engineers are former employees of the Grand Bahama Power Company. All of them. Hold on, let me see if we've gone, hold on, let me go back a bit. I missed this point that all of them, did I share this? No. The principal and directors all are all qualified Bahamian engineers. I missed that one. Something's happening with my computer. Good. And I did cover that one. Now the next one, for some reason, is not, okay. I had to force it to show up on the screen. Okay, I want you to see this and listen to this. This is a very key important point. I believe it's just as important as the cost of electricity being reduced, which I would say this is second to it. The principal of Northern Bahamas Utilities have collectively over 106 years of experience in power generation and transmission and distribution. Next, the leadership has been involved with power generation and power plants since about 1975, 23 years before EMIRA ever came into existence. 23 years before EMIRA ever came into existence. And I'm talking about EMIRA internationally. The team actually has more experience with the Grand Bahama Power Plant than EMIRA. Having over 35 years experience with GBPC, EMIRA has only been in existence internationally for over 19 years. And listen to this, they only have 10 years of experience with the Grand Bahama Power Company. So the question comes often, what experience do they have? They have more experience with this power plant than EMIRA has, and they're Bahamians. And finally, there at some point, once the power company is established and operational, at some point in the future, investment and ownership opportunities for Bahamians in the way of purchasing shares in the new power plant will be made available. And in particularly, what the company is committed to do is to allow Bahamians from West Grand Bahama to purchase shares in the company, and those who are in East Grand Bahama, they will be given first preference over others outside those territorial areas. And so, without any further delay, I want to bring before you the principal leader of Northern Bahamas Utilities. He is the president, CEO. I guess he has many titles, and we have been working together, making presentations in town meetings. We've been in Nassau on the national radio station and national television station. We will continue the campaign to get all this information out to the public in Grand Bahama, but also the nation of the Bahamas. So I want you to just welcome to this podium Dr. Carlton Bosfield as he makes his presentation to you on the power plant. And
to Living Waters for inviting us to make this presentation to you, because we have found out that over the past 8 to 12 months, these public presentations have been very helpful. They've not only been helpful, they've been educational. I have actually had people come into my office, and particularly in reference to Pastor's last slide, who would ask me just earlier this week, well, what is the price of the shares that you are going to sell to the Bahamians? So I said, well, we haven't gotten there just yet. You know, we need government approval and we need to build a power plant first. But I was very encouraged by it, because this was a gentleman who had only learned about the project from our public relations effort. And by no small token, the Coalition of Concerned Citizens have been very helpful in that regard. So I want to say thanks again to the Coalition, thanks to Pastor, and more importantly, thanks to Living Waters for having us here. My presentation is going to be somewhat short. It talks a little bit about what the project is all about, and a little bit of the background. In September of 1993, and in November of 1993, the government entered into 2 agreements with Grand Bahama Power Company. Those were 25-year agreements, and those were agreements to extend the power supplies outside of the Freeport area into the East and West Bahamas, Grand Bahama. 25 years is up. 25 years ends in 2018. And over the last 2.5 years, we have been agitating the government to consider an alternative to renewing those agreements. The alternative is exactly what was proposed in Pastor's presentation. We are talking about building solar plants to use the modern technology, and we can actually reduce the cost of electricity by 30 to 40% in those areas. The number that you will hear me talk about is going to be an all-in cost of 20 kilowatt hours, 20 cents per kilowatt hours. By comparison, right now you can pay anywhere from about 32 to 45 cents per kilowatt hour, which does not even include value-added tax. In addition to those agreements, we were talking about the resurgence of the GIN, but in particularly the possible of other projects in the East and the West. One of the things that we have not made a big deal of, but is very important, is that studies have shown that as the cost of electricity goes down in areas, economic development activity goes up. So it's not only residents that benefits, you have it then becoming a magnet for businesses who realize that energy costs in some cases can be as high as 30% of your operating costs. So if you can reduce that by 30 to 40%, it is only a smart business thing to do to move your operations into those territories. So we have already seen positive responses from potential businesses that would be prepared to move into the West and into the East, Grand Bahama, because of a plan like what we have proposed. What we are proposing? We are proposing the installation of what's called vertically integrated power plants. And there would be solar-operated power plants backed up by propane generators. As everybody knows by now, the cost of electric energy from solar systems is zero. It is free energy. You don't pay any fuel. There's no fuel component. However, it does have the unique characteristic is that once the sun goes down, solar panels don't put out. So we realized that we would need an alternative method of generation to actually support the plants during nighttime and when you have overcast days. That support would come from the propane generators. Why propane generators? The technology is developed to where they are now far more efficient than the fossil fuel generators that you see out on the market today. For example, if you've been keeping track of what has been happening with BPL in Nassau, they are hinging everything on their LNG, which is not propane, but it's another liquefied fuel that is far more cleaner and it's far more efficient than the old petroleum, heavy fuel oil, or diesel fuel oil that you hear everybody talk about. However, our proposal plans to use propane because it also has one additional advantage that LNG doesn't have. Propane is not considered a greenhouse gas. So when we talk about this plant has zero emissions of greenhouse gases. The solar plants don't emit anything, and the propane does not negatively affect the ozone layer that's around the earth that protects us as humans. This slide here gives you an idea of what the inverters for a grid level solar plant looks like. It's not like what you see in homes, which is a device that can weigh about anywhere from about 50 to 150 pounds. These devices would sit in a 10 to 20 foot container, and it can be as tall as 8 to 10 feet high. So it is actually a generator. It actually has, and when we talk about panels, and I remember from the press release we had a few weeks ago, one of the questions that came from the press was, how many panels does this system use? We're talking about 24 to 26,000 panels. So it is a lot of solar panels. The propane generators we were talking about at the beginning when we started negotiating this project with the government 2 years ago, we had enough time then to put in what was considered land-based propane generators. Since then, because we realized that we are now close to the deadline of the 25 years, we have gone out to one of our partners, and it's Caterpillar, and it's another local firm, and we've asked them for a solution that could be implemented on a much quicker timeline. So they came back to us with containerized gas-fired generators of about 1.4 megawatts. But they also have the advantage that they are very much more efficient, and Caterpillar would be prepared to help carry out all of the maintenance on these generators. The size of the generators, for the West, we're talking about 6 million watts of power, or what's commonly referred to in the industry as 6 megawatts. The propanes that would back that up would be about 10 megawatts. And you say, why 6 and 10? We have set reliability and availability targets for these plants of, in the case of availability, we want power available 100% of the time. That does not exist today in the Bahamas, and it sure does not exist today in Grand Bahama. Reliability, which is how much can I expect to have my power not interrupted? And we've set a reliability target of about 96% reliability. That exceeds the reliability of the other utilities in the Bahamas. At best, they are about 84% and lower. So we are talking about when in Freeport, you would see an occasional outage once or twice per month. We're talking about possibly once or twice per year with these plants. And that's why we're putting so much redundant generation capacity in the plants. For the east, we're talking about half the size of Freeport, just by virtue of the population size and the load size. We'd have a 3 megawatt solar plant, and that would be backed up by 6 megawatts of propane. The concept would be the same, it's just a smaller scale. And I may have. Okay, West Grand Bahama. The West Grand Bahama plant was developed further along than the East Grand Bahama plant, just by virtue of the fact that this process did not start with the existing Bahamian government. We were talking with the previous government since 2015. However, that government said that we were not to discuss it outside of the meetings and discussions we were having with the government. In other words, we were not allowed to talk about it publicly. When the government changed and we made the same presentation to the existing government, they said, well, if you guys want to go out and talk about it. And that resulted in what we thought was the one thing that has led us to where we are today, which is that now we can talk about these plans, but these plans have been developed to an extent that we were ready to implement them 2.5 years ago. For the West Grand Bahama plant, it was looking at a 16 megawatt plant on a 21-acre footprint in an area called Pelican Lake. Now, when you're going into West End, before you get to Boodle Bay, there's that body of water, and right next to it is the Pelican Lake constituency. We have entered into an agreement and discussion with an owner of a 51-tract acre plot of land there, which would give us the ability to build the existing plant, but also double its size as the area grows. In the West, we hadn't developed this one as further as we had done in the East, and it was because we had more interest in the government from the West previously than we had from the East. However, we did talk about it, and they said they agreed to it, and they said, okay, that could be a phase 2, but we really wanted to get West End going first. However, in the East, we are looking at about a 12-acre footprint, and this footprint would be in the residence of High Rock, and I'll show you a little bit more of the picture. This is a picture of an architectural artist rendition of what South Riding Point storage facility would have looked like if an LNG plant had been built some 8 to 10 years ago, in 2003, I think. And what it was proposed at that time, and I was also involved in that project, there was going to be a power plant built on the east side of South Riding Point. Those plants didn't come off. Those you might remember the Tractor Bell LNG plant. These were all discussions to talk about plants. But what we are looking now is there's a substation that was built by Grand Bahama Power on the west side of South Riding Point, and we're looking at building the solar field on that tract of land that goes from the road towards the sea. A better picture would be, this is a recent picture of Booger Lake. Here's where Grand Bahama Power existing substation is. We are talking about all of this property here as a potential site for the power plant. They also have the advantage that they're relatively high elevated areas, about 11 feet above normal sea level, which is about as high as it gets. In the Bahamas, we've got flatlands, but these areas are less prone to flooding than the other surrounding areas. Full integration with Grand Bahama Power. We're not talking about just building these plants in isolation. We realize that because we can have so much surplus power from the plants, we have the ability then to stay interconnected with Grand Bahama Power grid system, whereas any surplus power we have, we can then sell to them at a wholesale price, much lower than what they sell to their existing customers. One of our motives behind this was not only to help them with reliability, but also to provide them with an incentive to possibly look at lowering the cost of energy for people in the Freeport area. The other technical issues is that it's black start capability. We're going to look at using intelligent grid and microgrid technology. This is what's used by modern day utilities. It uses a high level of computer automation to allow you to determine far beyond the capabilities of humans when something is going wrong with the system. So if you see a little change in electrical characteristics, a computer picks it up with enough time to say, correct that. Hence, you don't have power outages. You fix it, the customer doesn't see anything, and that's where the 96% reliability comes from. The systems can be installed in blocks, and this was one of the interesting conversations that we got at the last town meeting. It says that, okay, if the government was to give us permission to build these solar plants, does Grand Bahama Power just stop providing power into those areas? No, it's not normally done like that. They have a stakeholder interest in the island, and the government has pretty much assured us that there will be a transition of the ability to generate. In other words, Grand Bahama Power presently generate 100% of the power to the east and the west. As we build these plants, we would then start generating 10%. They would then drop to 90%. We'd then go up to 50%. They would drop to 50. We'd then go up to 75. They would drop to 25. And then in 18 to 24 months, we'd expect the plants to be at 100%. Grand Bahama Power then is not providing any power to the customers in those areas, and we are then getting the benefit of the 20 cents per kilowatt hour. This is how it's typically done, so the concern that folks may have that there is a possibility of an interruption to their supplies, if we are given permission to build these plants, it's highly unlikely. Nobody sees that as an interest of any of the stakeholders. Project financing. Pastor articulated a little bit towards this. The financing process was this. You normally get government approval for these projects. You secure the east and the west and power agreements. You secure what's called a purchase power agreement with Grand Bahama Power. That's the mechanism through which you sell power to them. And then you have your financial folks, secure equity investors. And because the project is going to have a very small foreign component, and I will be frank and honest to you about it. These projects we estimated to be about $30 million. We have asked a foreign company to craft out a very small part of that to the tune of $2 million. We didn't just do it, we were asked to do it by the government. And they wanted to attract foreign direct investment with most investors, and that is a common practice. However, we expect that there would be 80% of this project that would be owned and controlled by Bahamians. Now I'd give you an idea, because if you were to follow these steps, how it's logically progressed towards providing financing for this project, we actually did it in reverse. We've already got the financing in place, and we are now waiting on the government approvals, and we are in discussion with Grand Bahama Power about the possibility of a power purchase agreement with them if the government gives us approval. So it was not done the traditional way, but we felt that one of the things we wanted to assure the government was that we did have the money to do this. And we've got letters of intent sitting in the Bahamas Investment Authority to indicate that the funding for this program is in place. Just sort of showing that from a block diagram standpoint, from the equity standpoint, 20% of the investment, the capital investment, we expect to be equity. Over here on this stream, you've got the stream of Bahamian investors. You got institutional investors, and you got local pension funds, insurance company union funds, local banks, and other high net worth Bahamian who would want to invest in projects like that. That would represent about 60 to 70% of the equity in there. And that would be B dollars. There's no foreign dollars there. The $2 million that I told you about comes in through another stream, which is US funding, which would be no more than 30 to 40%. Those would all be controlled by Providence Advisors, who is one of the firms that have given us the assurance through the letter of intent that they have the capability to provide the financing for this project once we get government approval. The other 80% of the capital would have been through debt financing. And the numbers that were run by the accountants suggest that this project is lucrative enough that you don't have to borrow all of the capital money as equity. Once you get the plants running, they will generate enough cash flow to service their own debt. So we are looking at 80% of the capital to be debt financing, but using the same mechanism. You've got the Bahamian component of investment through the B dollars mechanism. You've got the very small U.S. component, and you're coming down to running the East and the West project. As I mentioned earlier, we were asked to develop the West End project first, and there was interest by the previous government to do that. And we had gone ahead and we'd done a lot of work along that line. The next few slides will show you a little bit about the West End project that was done that should still apply today. Remember the 51-acre tract I told you about in Charlton Bay? This is where it is. It's sitting there, it's 51 acres. We've already talked to the owners, and we have a real estate broker who is brokering it for us. That has the ability to generate in total 14 megawatts of solar power. We're only looking to start with 6. And why 6? 6 is more than what Grand Bahama Power presently sends to the West End area. So we're just basing the plant size to meet the existing load and to provide the availability and reliability that we're looking for. However, as it grows, we figure that we can double the size of that plant, both from the solar plant standpoint, but also from the propane generator standpoint. The power line that would connect the new power plant to this would be, and those of you familiar with the work that was done on the GIN, there was a new power line that was built to go to West End. We would tie the new plant into that, and that would allow us to service West Grand Bahama and also sell power back to Freeport. This is just a footprint, what I said about 7.5 megawatts of solar field initially, 7 megawatts in future. I use 6 megawatts because 6 megawatts is effectively what you get out of that 7.5 megawatts. Engineering, procurement, and construction. Again, Pastor Eddie was spot on when he said the intent for this project to be pretty much owned, operated, built, and designed by Bahamians is what our goal was. We had reached out to professional engineering firms in Grand Bahama who had agreed to participate with the project. There's some components that I'll talk about, like the equipment. We don't manufacture equipment in the Bahamas, so we're gonna have to buy those. Most equipment come with manufacturer's warranty, so the manufacturers would have to be involved in the installation of it to get that warranty. But I will show you a slide that would have that. But first, looking at the Bahamian groups that we are looking at, NBU is, of course, non-Bahamas utilities would be the lead engineering, procurement, and construction contractor. GBPC Engineering, that's another group of professional Bahamian engineers, and that's the folks in that group have actually built the line that goes to West End, the GIN line that we talked about. These are the guys who built that. Rice Williams, an associate, another professional licensed Bahamian engineer who actually did a lot of the maintenance for Grand Bahama Power as their maintenance manager. And he's also working some of the other industrial companies in the industrial area. San Jose Construction, because there's going to be a lot of work with the excavation of land, we have engaged them in some of our discussions also. Remember I told you about the non-foreign component? Sun Bear Solar. That's a group who approached us because they had an interest in building solar plants on the size we were looking at. There were 6 and 7 megawatts. I met them through an association I had with another company that was building a 100 megawatt solar plant. They said, we don't go that small, but we have a company that would be very interested. They were also the company that had expressed an interest for the small equity component of the financing. SMA is that picture of the inverter. Those are the manufacturers for the inverter, and because we're going to buy them from them, they would come in. Caterpillar, and I shouldn't say foreign component because Caterpillar is local. That is Caterpillar local. They have been extremely supportive of the project. You know, when we went out there and says, okay, the government says that, you know, if we give you the go-ahead, how quickly can you get generators here in Grand Bahama? Caterpillar said, give us about a week. They came back and told us, in 3 weeks, we could bring you 20 megawatts of propane generators to the island. And they're still very much engaged with us in the development of this project. Allion Energy, those are the guys who design these large solar fields, and they have the ability to use a lot of automation. We've shown a slide of the process where they can actually put down 1 million watts of solar panel per day. So technically, if everything is in place, they can actually have the 6 megawatts of solar plant built in 1 week. Ramsey Energy, that's a Bahamian fuel provider who has access to at least allow them to try and source the propane for us for the power plants. A little bit of this was just to show you a sample of some of the projects that those teams have participated in. The GBPC is Grand Bahama Power. Pastor Eddie alluded to us. Northern Bahamas Utility is the technical arm of Grand Bahama Power before we all left the company. We built all their generators, the 20 and 15 megawatt steam units, their 15, 20, and 40 megawatt diesel generators. The new plant that's presently there now, we were engaged in that. We also built the 69 kV line that goes to the west for the GIN project. We have been engaged in the chemical plants that's under construction now. The new hotel, it's not new, but it was when this hotel was being built, some of our partners were involved in that. And of course, the Nassau Airport Gateway project, they were engaged in the construction of that, which is a part of the Bahama project. The foreign components, they have been involved in building these solar plants throughout the US, through the European Union. And the last 100 megawatt solar power plant in Pakistan, that is where I met most of them, because I was contacted by one of these companies to be the professional electrical engineer for that project. And we actually were very close to winning that project, but at the last minute it fell through. However, it allowed me to meet these other suppliers who were part of that construction team. But I'd give you an idea. People are saying that, you know, we're talking about 6 and 3 megawatts, that's going to be revolutionary. In Pakistan, they have already installed more than 200 megawatts of solar plant that supplies their grid. So it's not experimental. This is not prototype stuff. This is stuff that's been installed and been proven. For the West End project, they asked us to give us an organization chart for the team who would run the power plant. These are folks, these are Bahamians in those slots who actually have, a lot of them have worked with Grand Bahama Power in the past, but these are talented Bahamians who have run Grand Bahama Power Company, who have expressed an interest that they would be more than willing to participate in this project. Where we are today, and this is running to one of my last slides. Government approval. We're still waiting for the government through the Bahamas Investment Authority to tell us whether they're going to give us approval for the project. We've been in contact with them through our legal folks continuously. About 3, maybe 2 months ago, they contacted us and said, well, we have got it on the agenda and we're going to make a decision. Hopefully you all will hear from us in a few weeks. It just didn't work that way. However, the letters of intent, the 2 letters of intent, they have been submitted to Bahamas Investment Authority. On an environmental assessment for the West project, we'd already draft the initial environmental assessment. You know, if you hear about some of the other projects, that people tend not to do that. Solar plants are very clean. When we talk about zero emission, so it's very little impact on the environment. But we wanted to demonstrate a responsible approach to what we were proposing so that we didn't have somebody come back and say, well, you didn't do an environmental impact assessment. That's been done for the West End plant in a draft form. Project implementation, we have talked with the key suppliers and we can continue to do dialogue with them, Caterpillar being one, the US suppliers, but equally as important, the very last bullet. We have actually had meetings with Grand Bahama Power about if the government was to give us the approval for this project, that they would be prepared to negotiate selling their assets to us, because we are looking to run independent power companies in the east and the west. Grand Bahama Power would not be there anymore. We take over the meter reading, we take over the bill collection, we take over the billing. So we're talking about a fully integrated power plant. A little glimpse into the future. That kind of talk about the power plant, but I know that Pastor said that he wanted to talk about something that we have been doing. We are an energy development company. And as an energy development company, what we are looking for is ways to reduce your reliance and the cost of energy in the Bahamas. One of the things that we truly believe in is through the application of this. And this is more at a personal level. The electric car industry has developed significantly. When I said significantly, you've got about 6 of them on this island. This is the first one we brought in. You will hear a lot about it from the other guys. They've got about 3 of them. And then we know of somebody else who has about 2 of them and somebody else who has 1. However, these are fully electric vehicles. They do not run on any gasoline. They don't have a gas tank. They don't have exhaust pipes because they have 0 emissions. Right here you see this is the cable that's connected to a 240 volt outlet, and that charges the car in the night. The car can have a range of about 60 to 100 miles between charges. If it's fully depleted, it takes about 4 hours to charge, but if it's not depleted, it'll take some smaller percentage of that. It can range anywhere from about half an hour to a few hours to get it fully charged. In addition to that, we believe that with the implementation of the solar system, and we have proven this, if you install a large enough solar system at your home or at your business, you don't only have to get the power off the grid to run these vehicles, you get it from the solar system, i.e. it's free power, no more gas bill, no more pollution being emitted into the atmosphere from these vehicles that we see running around. And this is where everybody's going. You hear about the Tesla, every large every large vehicle manufacturer now has an electric vehicle that they're making commercial. As I mentioned there's no gasoline, 0 electricity costs, powered by a solar system, which is what we highly advocate. 0 emissions. We have also begun discussing with local gasoline stations that this is the wave of the future. And you don't have to be left out of it, but you need to have a quick charging port in your service station. 3 of them have indicated that they would be more than willing to do that. And what it does is rather than have to worry about getting back to your office or getting back to your home to charge your electric vehicle, you just pull up in the gas station, and because it's a quick charge port, you plug it in. If it's totally discharged, it takes 20 minutes to recharge. If it's not totally discharged, it can take a couple of minutes. So we see this as the way of the future, not only because it's sort of sexy, because we've got one out there, and when you look at it, you look in the car and you'd say, wow, this looks a little space agey to me, because it has a lot of computers, and it tells you how much your battery has left, how much miles you can, and it's continually monitoring all of that. But what it does, it can actually take that appetite that we have today for fossil fuel and high-cost electricity down. And that is one of the primary reasons, in addition to the large solar plants, why Northern Bahamas Utility was formed. So I guess if you have any questions for me, after the questions, I think there's a plan to go out and look at the car. But thank you all for being so attentive, and I hope I didn't bore you too much. Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
With regard to job opportunities.
Yes.
How or what do you forecast?
Okay, good question. And I had it on the slide, but I didn't allude to it. We're thinking about 50 jobs for the West End plant and about 35 for the East End plant. So in total, we're looking at about 85 jobs at the beginning. Again, as those plants expand, then you would recruit more folks.
Your requirements, recommendations for employment is going to be in-house training or sending off the training?
A combination of both, but the emphasis on Bahamians.
Is
we
Bahama Power amenable to what you're doing? You think that they will actually work with you?
they have entered into discussions with us. I'm limited what I can say because we had to sign a non-disclosure agreement with them. So I have to tread carefully. But I'm assuming that they will.
What about Focal?
Focal has expressed an interest, but like I said, there's quite a few fuel suppliers out there who've said that they see the writing on the wall.
Basically, they're not against it.
No, they realize that fossil fuel is not going to be around too much in the future. It is on its way out, I think. Any other questions, comments? Anyway, thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Pastor Eddie.
Just want to thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, and we will conclude this presentation by taking a walk over onto the great lawn of the Grand Lacayan so that we can actually take a look at the electric car. And so thank you, and God bless you today.
With your with diagnostics and repair, are you able to just log into like Central with
Yes,
Nissan and they can
get
just
on
tell you
Nissan,
what you
there
need to do?
There you were talking about it. This is the charging port. This would be the quick charging port. This is the one that we use now. That's connected up to 240 volts.
That's a long-term one.